The wind whispered across the endless stretch of desert, carrying grains of sand that shimmered under the golden light of the setting sun. Eliza stood still, her boots half buried in the warm earth, her eyes scanning a land that felt as though it belonged to another world entirely. This was not home. Everything about it felt too vast, too quiet, too alive in a way she didn't understand. Back where she came from, there had always been noise, voices, footsteps, expectations pressing in from every direction. Here, there was nothing but open sky and the steady rhythm of the wind. She wrapped her arms around herself, more out of instinct than cold. She had been sent here without much choice. Her old life closed behind her like a door that would never open again. And though she refused to admit it, fear lingered quietly beneath her determination. "I don't need anyone," she murmured to herself, her voice barely louder than the wind. It was a promise, a shield. Eliza took a step forward, then another, forcing herself to move deeper into the unfamiliar land. Every instinct told her to turn back, but there was nowhere to go. Only forward. That's when she felt it. A presence. It wasn't a sound or a movement, just a quiet awareness, like the air itself had shifted. Her breath caught slightly as she turned her head. At the edge of a distant ridge, partially hidden by shadow, stood a figure. He wasn't moving. He wasn't calling out. He simply stood there, watching. Eliza's heart began to beat faster, though she forced her expression to remain steady. She narrowed her eyes, trying to make out more details, but the fading light made it difficult. Still, there was no mistaking it. He had been there long enough to observe her, a stranger. Her first instinct was to leave, to put as much distance between them as possible. But something in her resisted that urge. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the stubborn fire that had carried her this far. Instead, she straightened her posture. "I see you," she said quietly, though she knew he likely couldn't hear her from that distance. The figure didn't respond. He didn't step closer, didn't gesture, didn't even shift his stance. It was as if he were part of the land itself, still, grounded, unshaken. That unsettled her more than if he had approached. Eliza turned away first, not because she was afraid, she told herself, but because she refused to give him the satisfaction of her attention. Whoever he was, whatever he wanted, she would not depend on him. She had learned that lesson long ago. People always came with expectations, with conditions, with invisible strings. She would not be tied down again. As she continued walking, she could still feel his presence behind her, like a quiet shadow stretching across the desert. It made her shoulders tense, but she didn't look back, not once. Sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The air began to cool and the vast silence deepened. Eliza finally slowed her pace, her energy fading after the long journey. She found a small rise in the land and sat down, pulling her knees close. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to really breathe. Out here, there was no one to tell her who she had to be. No one to judge her, no one to control her. And yet, she wasn't alone. Her eyes drifted back toward the ridge. The figure was gone, a strange mix of relief and something else, something she couldn't quite name, settled in her chest. She told herself it didn't matter. Whoever he was nothing to her, just a man in the distance, just a passing moment. But as the stars slowly began to appear in the darkening sky, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that this land had already begun to change something inside her. And that the silent stranger she had seen was not just a coincidence. She lay back against the cool earth, staring up at the endless sky. "I won't trust him," she whispered firmly, as if the words could anchor her. The wind carried her voice away, and somewhere in the quiet distance, unseen but not far, the man who had been watching remained part of the same silent night. Waiting. Morning came softly, as if the desert itself did not wish to disturb her. Eliza opened her eyes to a sky washed in pale gold, the first light of dawn, stretching endlessly above her. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The stillness felt almost unreal, too quiet, too vast. Then it returned to her. The journey, the loneliness, and the silent figure she had seen the evening before. She sat up quickly, her gaze instinctively searching the ridge where he had stood. Nothing. Only empty land and the slow dance of wind across the sand. A quiet breath escaped. Her lips half relief, half disappointment she didn't want to acknowledge. She shook her head slightly, brushing the thought away. He's nothing, she told herself, just someone passing through. But deep down she knew that wasn't true. People didn't just watch like that. The day grew warmer as the sun climbed higher. Eliza began walking again, her steps slower now, more careful. The desert demanded attention. Every movement mattered. Every choice carried weight. It didn't take long for frustration to settle in. Her throat felt dry. The heat pressed against her skin. And no matter where she looked, the landscape seemed unchanged, endless, repeating, unforgiving. She stopped, placing her hands on her hips as she scanned the horizon. This is ridiculous, she muttered. Back home, things had been difficult, but at least they had been familiar. Here, even survival felt like a puzzle she didn't know how to solve. She took another step and froze. There, just ahead, placed carefully on a flat stone, was a small bundle. Eliza's heart skipped. She approached slowly, every sense alert. Her eyes darted around the open land, searching for movement. No one. The bundle was wrapped in simple cloth. After a moment's hesitation, she knelt and unfolded it. Inside was a small container of water and a piece of dried food. She stared at it, her brows pulling together. Her first instinct was suspicion. Why would someone leave this? She whispered, but she already knew the answer. Her grip tightened slightly as she stood, looking out across the desert again. You think I need your help? She said aloud, her voice sharper now. The wind carried her words away, offering no reply. Anger flickered in her chest, not because of the gift, but because of what it implied. Weakness, dependence, the very thing she had fought so hard to escape. Without thinking, she placed the bundle back on the stone. I don't need it, she said firmly, and she walked away. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. The heat deepened, and the confidence she had clung to began to fade beneath the weight of reality. Her steps grew heavier. Her throat burned. Even the air felt dry against her lungs. Still, she refused to stop. I'm fine, she whispered, though her voice was rough now. I can handle this. But the desert did not listen. By the time the sun began to lower again, her vision had started to blur at the edges. The world felt distant, like she was walking through a dream she couldn't wake from. Finally, her legs gave in. She dropped to her knees, her hands pressing into the sand as she struggled to steady her breathing. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a shadow fell across the ground beside her. Eliza's head lifted. Slowly. He stood there. Closer now. No longer just a distant figure on a ridge, but real, solid, unmistakable. The same quiet presence, the same stillness. His expression was calm, unreadable, yet not unkind. The Apache man. Kale. Eliza's single quotes S jaw tightened immediately. I told you, she managed, her voice weak but defiant. I don't need help. Cale didn't respond right away. He simply looked at her, not with judgment, not with pity, but with something far steadier. Understanding, perhaps, or patience. Then, without a word, he knelt down and placed the same bundle, the water and food, gently in front of her. She stared at it. Then back at him. I said no, she insisted, though there was less strength behind the words now. Still, he didn't argue. Didn't push. He simply left it there. and stood again. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, not control, not force, but choice. Then Cale turned and began to walk away. No pressure, no expectation, just leaving. Eliza watched him go, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Her gaze dropped slowly to the bundle in front of her. The water. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. For a moment, she hesitated. Then finally, quietly, she gave in, not to him, but to the truth she could no longer ignore. As she took a small sip, the cool relief spread through her, grounding her again. Her eyes closed briefly, a soft breath escaping her lips. When she looked up again, Cale was already far in the distance, watching no longer. Following no longer. Just gone. Eliza lowered her gaze, her thoughts unsettled. This doesn't change anything, she murmured. But deep inside, something had already begun to shift. Not trust. Not yet, but the beginning of something she couldn't quite resist. The night stretched wide and endless above them, filled with more stars than Eliza had ever seen in her life. Back where she came from, the sky had always felt smaller, dimmed by noise, by light, by everything that crowded in too close. But here, it felt infinite, quiet, honest. She lay on her back, her hands resting lightly over her stomach, her breathing slow and steady. For once, her thoughts weren't racing, not completely, at least. A soft shift of movement nearby reminded her she wasn't alone. Cale sat a short distance away, near a small rise in the earth. He hadn't spoken since they had settled here, but his presence was unmistakable, calm, grounded, constant. It was strange. She had spent so much energy pushing him away. And now, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt comfortable. Eliza turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting toward him. You don't talk much, she said. Her voice broke the quiet gently, as if testing whether the moment could hold it. Cale didn't look at her right away. His eyes remained on the horizon, where the last trace of light had long since faded. Words are not always needed, he replied. His tone was even, thoughtful, not distant, but careful. Eliza huffed softly, turning her gaze back to the sky. Well, where I come from, people talk a lot, she said. Sometimes too much. A faint pause. Then, quietly, they do not always mean what they say. She blinked, surprised. For a moment, she didn't answer, because he was right. The wind moved gently across the land, cooler now, carrying with it a sense of calm that seemed to settle deep in her chest. Eliza shifted slightly, propping herself up on one elbow. Why were you watching me? She asked. This time, Cale looked at her. Not sharply, not defensively, just directly. You were alone, he said. That's not an answer, she replied. It is enough. She frowned faintly, studying him. There was something frustrating about the way he spoke, so simple, so steady, as if everything unnecessary had been stripped away. And yet, there was something honest about it, too. He wasn't hiding anything. He just wasn't offering more than what was true. Eliza sat up fully now, pulling her knees close to her chest. I didn't ask to be here, she said after a moment. The words came quieter than she expected. Cale didn't interrupt, didn't react. He simply listened, and for some reason, that made it easier to continue. I had a life, she went on, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the sand. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good most of the time. But it was mine. Her fingers tightened slightly against her sleeves, and then suddenly it wasn't anymore. The wind passed between them again, soft but steady. I got tired, she admitted. Tired of people deciding things for me, telling me what I needed, what I should be. Her voice didn't break, but it came close. So I stopped listening, she added, stopped trusting. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. Cale shifted slightly, resting his forearms against his knees. "That is why you refuse help," he said. It wasn't a question. Eliza let out a small, humorless breath. "Something like that." For a while, neither of them spoke again. The quiet wrapped around them, but this time it felt different, softer, warmer. Eliza glanced at him once more, her expression more thoughtful now. "What about you?" she asked. Cale tilted his head slightly. "You don't seem like someone who just watches strangers," she continued. "So why me?" For a moment he didn't answer. His gaze lifted toward the sky, as if searching for something in the stars. Then, finally, "You fight the land," he said. Eliza blinked. "What? You walk against it," he explained. "You push when you should listen." Her brows pulled together slightly. "That's just how I survive," she said. Cale looked back at her, his expression calm but certain. "It is not the only way." The words settled between them, not as criticism, not as judgment. Just truth. Eliza looked away again, her thoughts shifting in ways she wasn't used to. Back home, strength had meant resistance, control, standing firm no matter what. But here, the land didn't bend. It didn't argue. It simply existed. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight everything. A quiet stillness fell again, deeper this time, without thinking. Eliza leaned back once more, her eyes returning to the sky. "It's strange," she said softly. Cale didn't respond, but she knew he was listening. "I thought being alone would feel freeing," she admitted. "And it does, in a way." A small pause, "But it's also quieter than I expected." The last word lingered. Cale shifted slightly, his voice low. "You are not alone." Eliza's chest tightened, not painfully, but enough to make her notice. She didn't answer, didn't argue. For once, she didn't resist the idea. The stars burned brighter as the night deepened, and somewhere between the silence and the shared space, something inside Eliza shifted again. Not completely, not all at once, but the walls she had built so carefully, so stubbornly, they weren't gone, but for the first time they had begun to crack. The morning arrived slowly, as if the desert itself was reluctant to let go of the night. A soft glow spread across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pale gold and warm amber. Eliza stirred, her eyes opening to the quiet stillness that had become strangely familiar. For a moment she didn't move. She simply listened. The wind was softer today. The air felt calmer. And somewhere nearby she could hear the faint crunch of footsteps against sand. Cale. She turned her head slightly. He was already awake, standing a short distance away, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if reading something invisible in the shifting light. Eliza sat up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked. Cale glanced at her briefly. "Enough," he replied. She exhaled softly, a faint smile almost forming before she caught herself. Almost. They began walking not long after, the rhythm between them now easier, more natural. There were still no long conversations, no unnecessary words, but the silence had changed. It no longer felt like distance. It felt like understanding. Eliza noticed the small things now, the way Cale adjusted his pace when the ground grew uneven, the way he paused briefly when the wind shifted, as if listening to something she couldn't hear, the way he never walked too far ahead, but never too close either. It was a balance, one she hadn't realized she needed. By midday, the sun had risen high again, casting long waves of heat across the land. They reached a narrow stretch between rocky formations, where the ground sloped unevenly beneath their feet. Eliza stepped carefully, her boots sliding slightly against loose sand. "I've got it," she muttered, more to herself than to him. Cale said nothing, But his attention shifted subtle. Watchful Dot, she took another step, then another Dot, and then the ground beneath her foot gave way. Dot, it wasn't dramatic. Not a fall from a height. Not anything dangerous. Dot, just enough. Dot, enough to break her balance. Dot, her breath caught as her body tilted forward, her footing slipping on the shifting sand. For a split second, everything felt uncertain. The ground, the air, her own sense of control. Dot, and then warmth. Strong, steady, immediate. Cale's arms caught her before she could fall. Time slowed. Eliza's hands instinctively grasped onto him, her fingers curling lightly against his shoulders as she steadied herself. His hold was firm, but not forceful, supportive, grounding. Dot, she looked up. Dot, and for the first time, there was no distance between them. Dot, no space. Dot, no silence to hide behind. Dot, just closeness. Dot, her breath stilled, not from fear, not from surprise, but from something she didn't recognize at first. Dot, his eyes met hers, calm, steady, searching but not demanding. There was no urgency in him, no expectation. Just presence. Dot, real, unshaken, certain. Dot, and in that moment, everything else faded. The wind softened, the heat disappeared, even the vastness of the desert seemed to fall away. Dot, it was just them. Eliza didn't pull away. She should have. Every instinct she had built over the years told her to step back, to create distance, to protect herself from anything that felt too close. But she didn't, because for the first time, it didn't feel like something she needed to protect herself from. Dot, it felt still. Dot, safe. Dot, her grip on him loosened slightly. Though she didn't move away completely, neither did he. Cale's hold remained steady, as if giving her the choice rather than making it for her. You're steady now, he said quietly. The words were simple, but his voice low, calm, close, sent a quiet ripple through her chest. Eliza swallowed softly, her thoughts struggling to catch up with the moment. I know, she replied. Though she hadn't moved, a faint pause lingered between them, long enough to feel, long enough to matter. Then, slowly, reality began to return. The wind picked up again. The warmth of the sun pressed lightly against her skin, and awareness came rushing back all at once. Eliza stepped back, quickly, but not harshly. Her gaze dropped for a brief second before she forced it back up. I said I had it, she muttered, though her voice lacked its usual sharpness. Cale didn't respond immediately. He simply nodded once, as if accepting her words without needing to challenge them. You did, he said. No argument. No correction. Just quiet agreement. That unsettled her more than anything else. Eliza turned away, brushing her hands lightly against her clothes as if trying to shake off the moment. But she couldn't. It lingered. In her thoughts. In her chest. In the way her breathing hadn't quite returned to normal. They continued walking after that, but something had changed. The space between them felt different now, not larger, not smaller. Just more aware. More real. Eliza found herself glancing at him when she thought he wouldn't notice, and each time her chest tightened slightly, not with fear, but with something far more unfamiliar. As the sun began to lower once more, painting the desert in soft gold and shadow, Eliza slowed her steps. Her mind drifted back to that moment, the way everything had stilled, the way she hadn't wanted to pull away, the way for a brief second nothing else had mattered. She exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. That didn't mean anything, she whispered to herself, but the words didn't feel convincing. Not this time, because deep down, she knew something had shifted. Something she couldn't ignore. And no matter how hard she tried to push it away, she couldn't stop replaying the moment when his arms had pulled her close, and time itself had seemed to stop. Not in the way it looked. The endless stretch of sand and sky remained unchanged, but in the way Eliza moved through it. Every step carried a quiet awareness now, a lingering echo of something she couldn't quite push away. She kept her distance. Not physically, they still walked within sight of each other, still shared the same path, but something inside her had shifted back into defense. Careful, guarded, resisting. Eliza walked a few steps ahead, her eyes fixed firmly on the horizon. She didn't glance back as often, didn't speak unless necessary, and most of all she avoided being close to him. Too close. Cale noticed. Of course he did, but he didn't question it, didn't try to close the distance she was creating. He simply adjusted, just as he always had, matching her pace, respecting the space she silently demanded. That only made it harder. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Eliza suddenly asked, stopping in her tracks. The words came sharper than she intended. Cale paused behind her. "You do not wish for it," he replied calmly. She turned, frustration flickering across her face. "I didn't say that. You did not need to." His tone wasn't cold. It wasn't accusing. Just certain. Eliza let out a breath, running a hand through her hair as she looked away. "That's not," she started, then stopped herself because she didn't know how to finish that sentence. The truth was messy. Confusing. And far too close to something she wasn't ready to admit. "I just don't like things getting complicated," she said finally. Cale studied her for a moment. "Feeling is not complication," he said. Her gaze snapped back to him. "It is when it changes things," she replied quickly. "And you do not want change." It wasn't a question. Eliza's jaw tightened. "No," she said firmly, "I don't." Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't soft. It wasn't comfortable. It pressed between them, filled with everything neither of them was saying. They continued walking, but the rhythm from before had shifted. Their steps no longer matched as naturally. The quiet understanding they had built now felt fragile. Like something easily broken. Eliza tried to focus on anything else. The path, the wind, the steady rise and fall of her breathing, but her mind betrayed her. It kept returning to that moment, the way his arms had felt around her, strong, steady, grounding. The way she hadn't been afraid, the way she hadn't wanted to move. She stopped abruptly again, pressing her fingers lightly against her temples. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. Cale remained still a few steps behind her. "Are troubled," he said. "I'm not," she replied immediately. A pause, then quieter. "I just don't understand it." Cale stepped slightly closer, not enough to overwhelm her, just enough to be heard without the distance. "You do not need to understand it," he said. Eliza let out a soft, almost frustrated laugh. "That's easy for you to say. Why?" "Because you're not the one." She stopped again, her words catching. "Not the one what?" "Feeling it, questioning it, afraid of it." Her shoulders dropped slightly. "You don't question anything," she said instead. "You just accept things." Cale tilted his head slightly. "I listen," he replied. "To what?" "The truth." Eliza frowned, her gaze searching his face. "And what does that even mean?" Cale didn't answer immediately. His eyes held hers for a moment steady, calm, unshaken. "Your heart is not in conflict," he said. "Only your thoughts are." The words landed softly, but they stayed. Eliza looked away quickly, shaking her head. "No," she said, "that's not true." But even as she said it, something inside her hesitated, because part of her knew he wasn't wrong. She exhaled sharply, stepping back slightly as if to create space again. "I can't do this," she said. "Do what?" "This, whatever this is," she gestured faintly between them. "It's too much, too fast, too real." Cale offered quietly, her breath caught. For a moment, she didn't respond, because that was exactly it. It felt real. Too real. And that terrified her more than anything else. "I don't trust things that feel like this," she admitted, her voice softer now. They don't last. They don't stay. Cale's expression didn't change, but something in his gaze deepened. Not everything leaves, he said. Eliza shook her head. Everything does, she whispered. The wind passed between them again. Stronger this time, carrying grains of sand across the ground. For a long moment, neither of them moved, then Cale stepped back, not in defeat. The distance between them was no longer just measured in steps. It had settled somewhere deeper, quiet, invisible, but unmistakable. Eliza felt it with every breath. The sun had already begun its slow descent, softening the harsh edges of the desert into warm gold and long shadows. The air carried a gentler touch now, but the calm around her only made the storm inside her more noticeable. She walked alone. Not entirely. Cale was still there, somewhere behind her, but far enough that his presence no longer grounded her the way it had before. And that was the problem. Eliza stopped, her boots pressed into the sand as she stared ahead, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Why does this feel wrong? She had wanted space. She had asked for it. So why did it now feel like something important was slipping away? She turned slightly, her eyes searching the distance. Cale stood far behind her, just a quiet figure against the fading light. He hadn't followed closely, hadn't tried to close the space she created. He had done exactly what she wanted, and somehow that hurt more. Eliza let out a slow breath, her hands tightening at her sides. This is what you wanted, she murmured to herself. Independence, control, distance, everything. She had fought so hard to protect, but now that she had it again, it didn't feel the same. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt empty. Her mind drifted back uninvited, unstoppable. To the way he had watched her without judgment. To the quiet guidance he had offered without expecting anything in return. Too. The way he had stepped back the moment she needed space, without making her feel guilty for it. And most of all, to that moment, the one she couldn't forget, the one where time had stilled, where nothing had felt uncertain or forced or overwhelming. Just right. Eliza closed her eyes briefly, her breath catching. That wasn't weakness, she whispered. It had felt like peace. Her eyes opened again, sharper now, clearer. For so long, she had believed that relying on someone even just a little meant losing herself. That trust meant giving up control, but Cale had never taken anything from her. He had never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel small. If anything, he had given her space to be stronger. Eliza turned fully now, her gaze locking onto him in the distance. He hadn't moved. Still calm, still steady. Still there? Quiet realization settled into her chest. He didn't leave, even when she pushed him away, even when she resisted, not in a way that trapped her, but in a way that gave her the choice to come back. Her heart beat faster, not with fear this time, but with something far more certain, a decision. Eliza took a step, then another. Her pace quickened, her boots pressing more firmly against the sand. As she moved toward him, each step felt lighter, clearer, like she was finally moving toward something instead of away from it. Cale noticed. Of course he did. He straightened slightly, his gaze meeting hers as she approached. He didn't step forward, didn't close the distance. He waited. Eliza slowed as she reached him, her breath steadying as she stopped just a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The desert seemed to hold its breath around them. I was wrong, she said finally. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was certain. Cale didn't respond immediately. He simply watched her, giving her the space to continue. I thought, if I let myself feel anything, I'd lose control, she admitted. I thought it would make me weaker. She shook her head slightly, but it doesn't. Her gaze lifted fully to his now. It doesn't feel like that with you. The wind moved gently between them, carrying the weight of her words into the open air. Cale stepped forward this time, but slowly, carefully, as if making sure she had time to change her mind. She didn't. "I don't understand everything," Eliza continued, her voice softer now. "And maybe I don't need to." A small breath left her lips, "but I know how it felt when you held me." The words lingered. Honest, unguarded. Cale stopped just in front of her, close enough now that the distance between them felt intentional, not forced, not avoided. "Peace," he said quietly. Eliza nodded. Double yes. For a moment, that was enough. No explanations. No questions. Just truth. "I don't want to run from that anymore," she said. Her voice carried something new now, not resistance, not fear, choice. Cale's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes softened, something warmer, deeper. "You do not have to," he replied. Eliza let out a slow breath, the tension she had been carrying finally beginning to ease. For the first time since she had arrived in this land, she wasn't fighting it. She wasn't fighting him. And most importantly, she wasn't fighting herself. As the sun dipped lower, painting the world in soft gold and shadow, Eliza stood there with a quiet certainty settling into her heart. She had spent so long protecting herself from everything she thought might break her. But now she understood not everything that reaches you is meant to hurt you. Some things are meant to stay. And this time she was ready to stop resisting and finally choose trust. The desert seemed quieter than ever before. Not empty, never. Empty but calm in a way Eliza had never truly felt until now. The wind moved softly across the land, carrying warmth from the fading sun as it dipped lower toward the horizon. Everything felt still. But this time, the stillness didn't unsettle her. It welcomed her. Eliza stood facing Cale, the space between them no longer filled with hesitation or resistance. The weight she had carried for so long, the need to fight, to guard, to stay distant, had finally begun to fall away. Not completely, but enough, enough, for her to stand here without fear. For a moment, neither of them moved. The golden light of the setting sun wrapped around them, casting long shadows across the sand. It painted everything softer, quieter, as if the world itself understood the importance of this moment. Eliza's heart beat steadily, not rushed, not uncertain. Just present. "You stayed," she said softly. Cale's gaze remained steady on hers. "Yes." No explanation. No need for one. She nodded slightly, her eyes searching his, not for answers this time, but for something she already knew she would find. And she did. There was no pressure in him. No demand. No expectation. Only the same quiet strength, the same grounded presence that had been there from the very beginning. Eliza took a small step forward. This time, she didn't hesitate, didn't second guess, didn't pull herself back. "I spent so long thinking I had to do everything alone," she admitted, "that if I let someone get close, I'd lose myself." Her voice was calm now, no longer weighed down by fear. "But I was wrong." The words felt lighter as they left her. Truer. Cale stepped closer too slowly, giving her time, giving her space to choose. And she did. "You didn't take anything from me," Eliza continued. "You didn't change who I am." Her lips curved into the faintest, softest smile. "You just stood beside me." The distance between them faded until there was almost none left, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, close enough that the world beyond them began to blur once more. Cale lifted his hand slightly, not sudden, not forceful, just enough to let her see the movement, to give her the choice again. Eliza didn't step back. She didn't hesitate. Instead, she moved closer. And when his arms gently wrapped around her, she let them. Time slowed again, just like before. But this time, everything felt different. There was no surprise. No confusion. No instinct to pull away. Eliza rested her hands lightly against him. Her fingers no longer tense, no longer unsure. Her breathing steadied as she leaned into the moment. Instead of resisting it into him, the world faded into silence. The wind softened. The light of the setting sun seemed to pause on the horizon, as if even it didn't want to move forward just yet. And in that quiet space, Eliza understood. This wasn't something she had to fight. It wasn't something that would take her strength away. It was something that gave it meaning. Her eyes closed briefly, a soft breath escaping her lips as she allowed herself to feel it fully. The calm, the certainty, the peace. Cale's hold remained steady, never tightening, never forcing, just there, constant and sure. A presence she could trust, a place she could choose. Eliza opened her eyes slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not afraid anymore." The words felt different this time, not like a defense, but like a truth. Cale looked at her, his expression unchanged yet somehow deeper, warmer. "Good," he said quietly. A faint smile touched her lips, real this time, unguarded. She didn't step away, didn't create distance. Instead, she leaned in just slightly more, her presence matching his without hesitation. The moment lingered, unrushed, unbroken, and for the first time since she had arrived in this vast, unfamiliar land, Eliza didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Not to the desert, not to him, not even to herself. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky filled with endless stars. But even as the world moved forward again, something remained, because this time when his arms held her close, she didn't resist, she didn't run, she didn't question it, she stayed. And in that quiet, unspoken choice, time didn't just stop. It became something she no longer needed to escape from.